On behalf of the CBPA and its steering committee, we'd like to welcome everyone to this first opportunity to hear directly from the parents about their involvement and leadership. With everything that's going on in sports and the world right now, we'd also like to just say thank you for joining us today. We're going to start today's press conference with introductions of the CBPA Steering Committee, remarks from the CBA co-executive directors, and then we're going to have a very special guest in Clark Kellogg talk with the Steering Committee about their passion to help other parents. After that, we'll open it up to questions from members of the media. Please feel free to submit your questions now through the Q&A and not the chat if you could. We'll select your question. We'll elevate you to panelist so that the parents can see you and hear from you as you ask your question. And with that, we ask that you identify yourself by name and media outlet before asking your question. And if your question is directed towards a specific parent or family or a group of parents, please state that with your question. Without further ado, it's my pleasure to introduce the co-executive director for the CBPA, Mr. E. Courtney Scott.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Bruce. On behalf of the CBPA, I would like to say thank you to the media that's in attendance and also to you, Mr. Clark Kellogg, for moderating for this panel for us. This means a lot to us. Our CBPA family includes Mr. Kareem and Rona Moody, the standout parent of standout Moses Moody. We also have Mr. Roderick and Stacy Johnson, parent of Western Illinois forward Rod Johnson and Duke forward Jalen Johnson. Ms. Tonja Morrison, parent of standout point guard and 2019 SEC All-Defensive Team Q Morrison. Our co-secretary, Mr. Deon and Laquita Harmon, parents of two-time USA gold medalist, point guard for Oklahoma, Deon Harmon. Our co-secretaries are Mr. Larry Suggs and Molly Manley, parents of freshman guard and three-time gold medalist, Jalen Suggs. Our co-director of education are Mr. Joe and Carole Roach, parents of standout point guard and two-time gold medalist with USA Basketball, Jeremy Roach. Our other co-executive director is Mrs. Allison Tegler, parent of Dartmouth guard, Mia Curtis. Mr. Eric and Jean Dixon, parents of Villanova forward, Eric Dixon Jr. Miss Melissa Smitherman, parent of forward Seth Towns. And our other co-executive director is Luke Fedlam. Now, we're also missing, because there's a game, we're missing Greg Brown Jr. He's the parent. He's the parent of Greg Brown III, who attends the University of Texas. We're also missing, who couldn't be with us today, Mr. Ramsey Hardy. He is the parent of Amara Hardy, and Mr. and Mrs. Burnett. They are the parent of Namara Burnett, who attends Texas Tech. The reason we started the CBPA was through my travels and working with families. The parents of these athletes have always felt left out. We wanted to build a community, and the CBPA is all about community, education, and advocacy. You know, one of the other goals that we would love to, that we're aiming to do, is work with the other stakeholders in men's and women's college basketball, so we can form a critical mass and work for the greater good for these student athletes. And in saying that, I would like to pass the ball over to Mr. Luke Fedlam. Thank you all.
Thanks so much, Courtney. Appreciate it. And just wanted to say thank you all so much to the parents. Thank you so much to the media for joining us today. You know, I just want to say, you know, in my work with families of student athletes, my focus is always on protection. And the first step of protection is education. And so our goal with the CBPA is really to help ensure the parents on a national level receive that necessary education on all the different and changing issues that are affecting their student athletes. So as we continue to bring together the families of the College Basketball Parents Association, we're going to be conducting surveys to better understand the perspectives, the experiences, the issues and challenges that families face and what they want to be better prepared to handle, not just for themselves, but also for future college basketball families as well. So since we launched the CBPA about a week ago, literally right before the season started and right before Thanksgiving, we've had over 50 families and close to 90 parents become members, including the steering committee. We've had close to 20 high school basketball parents join us to bring membership to over 100 members total. And we're really excited because as the word continues to get out about the College Basketball Parents Association, we know that more and more families will continue to join. So we're thankful for the messages of support that we've received from so many throughout the college basketball landscape. And we really look to build those strategic alliances that'll continue to help make college basketball the best that it can be. So with that said, and speaking of the best that college basketball can be, I'm really excited to introduce a mentor, a friend who is known almost synonymously with college basketball, who's also a parent of college athletes, the one and only Clark Kellogg. So Clark, I'll turn it over to you.
Appreciate it, Luke. Thank you. And great to be here with all of the parents and Bruce and Luke and Courtney and the members of the media that have carved out some time to join us. I'm really excited to see the creation of the College Basketball Parents Association for a lot of reasons, a ton of reasons. It's time to have this type of empowering educational resource and education for the parents of Division I athletes, particularly as we look at it from this perspective, men's and women's basketball at the college level. I'm the proud parent. My wife and I have 3 Division I athletes, former Division I athletes. Our daughter played volleyball and both boys were Division I college scholarship basketball players. And so I have a tremendous amount of respect and passion for parents and the journey that they take with their student athletes who have the ability and the desire and the good fortune to have a chance to earn a scholarship to play basketball at the Division I, II, or III level. So to see this association come into existence and to be here for this initial press conference and the creation and launch of the CBPA is doing my heart a lot of good, because I believe that education and empowerment is always beneficial, particularly as we look at this particular aspect of Division I athletics. So with that said, we've got members of the steering committee on with us, and I know you all have joined to hear from them in an effort to make sure each of them have an opportunity to engage in the conversation. We've got a few questions that we've parceled off to groups of the steering committee. So I'd like to get started with our first question, and this is directed to the Moody's, to Allison Tegler, and to Carole and Joe Roach. Why is the CBPA needed and important to you all? And make sure you hit that unmute button.
Hey, I see you on there, Joe. I'll jump in there and just say basketball is better when parents are involved. And I think for me, having gone through the process from junior high, middle school, and on up to college, you talk to parents along the way, and we're all asking the same questions. We're helping each other in a lot of informal ways. And you hear horror stories, you hear things that, people go through. And I just feel like it's important for us to find a way to just communicate, spark some narratives of our own, and help inform the processes. Right now we see there are so many decisions being made. A lot of things are happening that if parents' voices are there, I think it just helps make the whole basketball ecosystem move in a different way. So I just felt like it was important. I wanted to be a part of kicking the ball off and, just helping other parents be comfortable and know that we can communicate, we can work together. After being out on the circuit and meeting a lot of these parents, if nothing else, you get a chance to continue to hang out with them and get that information. But these guys were already ahead of the game, and I just felt like it was an idea whose time had come. So it just made sense.
There you go.
I agree with that. And, when my daughter was starting the recruiting process, we relied on other people heavily, and we relied on their experiences and their advice. And we were lucky enough to have that around us, but I don't think that everyone has that. And now that she's in college, we still look to others because everything is new to us. And it's an exciting time, but it can be stressful, it can be overwhelming. And building something that provides education, that provides resources, and provides a community is just something that I think is just invaluable.
Yeah.
And just to, I agree with what, Allison and Kareem have said. And, just having a resource, just having education, it is empowering, and it does. There are so many questions that as a parent you have. Some of this, is uncharted territory if you're new to the, the recruiting process. And so it can be daunting and you don't know where to go. I mean, what are you going to Google your questions that you have to find out? So to really have a community and a base that you can rely on that gives you reliable information. You don't have to worry about if the information is not going to be coming from a credible source. And, no matter how small the question is or how large it is, the CBPA is here to get it answered. And again, just to build that relationship with the families. I mean, we see them in the gym, but we never get to hear their stories. And so now we get to hear their stories, we get to hear their experiences. Some are the same, some are very different. So it just, brings everybody together. And I think, it does empower you to feel like a family. You feel like a basketball family. Right. You have these Division I athletes, Division II, and maybe sometimes you feel like you're on an island by yourself. And now you have a place where you can come and you can share your story and you can share your heartache or your successes. And that feels really good. So I do enjoy the education and just having a resource to lean on.
Yeah.
Any other thoughts or comments on that question? Great answers. And I certainly can resonate with all of that, having 3 kids that were recruited, and I had gone through it myself. But nonetheless, that collaboration and shared experience and storytelling and resource sharing is invaluable. And this is a pretty unique fraternity when you think about it. Right. I mean, there are thousands of kids that play Division I athletics, hundreds of thousands, but when you whittle it down to basketball, men's and women's, that is kind of a unique, special fraternity for that particular sport, and sharing of common experiences and challenges and questions, I think is invaluable. So I agree wholeheartedly. Any other thoughts or comments before I move to our next question?
Well, I'll just echo that, Clark, because I do think that you hit the nail on the head. And for parents, the camaraderie that comes with being involved for all those years, I think that value, being able to just help inform the next stage. I think our voices have an impact, and you can see that, hear that in the stuff that's going on. So yes, that narrative is being shifted with parents' voices involved. So I agree.
Yeah, appreciate it. Thank you. And that segues nicely, Kareem, into my next question for our next group of the steering committee members, Mr. and Mrs. Johnson Sr., Lakita and Deon Harmon, and then Jean and Eric Dixon, and Ramsey Hardy. My next question is this for those parents that are with us this afternoon. Why is it so important for the CBPA from the outset to have a focus on the future families of college basketball that are at the high school level now? So Eric, I see you kind of leaning in, so I'll let you start, and then the other families can look like you were ready to go right at it.
Well, I mean, I just think it made sense because my son actually committed before the end of his junior year. But we were able to make that decision and be confident in that decision because of the type of information and resources we were able to gather from our personal contacts and networks. But we were in the midst of those conversations and that decision while he was still in high school. We actually visited over a dozen colleges on our own dime in order to try to gather that information. And really, I think it's just smart to be able to, instead of having to rely on our own research, and other people might not have the type of resources that we were able to put into it. So it's good to be able to learn from the experiences of other people and save, you don't have to reinvent the wheel. So I think it's very important that high school parents get the information, have the information at the ready so they can make a type of informed decision and be as comfortable with it as we were with ours.
Yeah, well, I'll piggyback off Mr. Dixon. I agree with what he said. It's the CBPA is good for families, to get a better perspective when it comes to regarding their transitions related to college, to making that jump into college sports. And it makes them, it feels better. They'll feel better prepared in making those decisions on their future. We've been through this recruiting process, 3 times. We have 3 different perspectives on the recruiting process. We have our oldest son. He had 1 scholarship offer going after his senior year of high school, and that was to a Division II. We have our other son, Jasmyn Johnson, who was a top 10 recruit in the country, recruited by every school. And then we have our youngest son, who played who had to follow in the shadows of Jasmyn and had to build his own name up. So we had so many questions. We learned through the process. So I think the CBPA will help you with that, because Courtney was a great guide for us. Whenever we had a question or a concern, we would give him a call and he'd be like, Mr. Johnson, I can help you out. So I think the CBPA, especially with so many parents and so many different experiences, like everyone has said, is huge. And then, my favorite thing is it educates, empowers, and it advocates for all these families. And the biggest thing is you are in control of your recruiting process. No one else is in control. You don't have to lean on AAU directors or guys or runners or anything like that. You control your process. The families control the process. And that's the biggest thing about it, is you want to give the families you want to give them the power.
And I think to Rod's points as well, I think a piece of a lot of this too is there's a slight intimidation factor, right, in this process, and to be able to reach out to those that have gone through the experience. I know I'm repeating a lot of what people said, but it's invaluable. I know for us, the 3 different circumstances we had with each of our kids, I would have loved to be able to have somebody reach out to on many occasions. So to be able to pull the high school families into this and not have to go through some of the obstacles that we went through is a wonderful thing.
Yeah, I'd like to just reiterate that, because we're calling it the CBPA, College Basketball Parents Association, but I'm pretty sure all of us started this journey with our kids in high school. Some have some kids that have some measurements that can get them looked at even in middle school, but for the most part, we all go into this thing kind of walking in the dark. We have no idea where we're going, and we just need a resource that can help guide us through this process. So as Rod said, that we can have a little bit more control, because at the end of the day, a more educated parent can be a much better parent. We can just do the things to advocate and protect our kids. And just having this resource starting in high school is the most valuable thing I can see. And the Johnsons have kind of went through one thing that I do want to point out again, is that we all have different experiences. They have all the experiences rolled into a whole family with the 3 kids. You got mid-level, high level, and everybody is getting all their information off of social media through Twitter, and they're trying to relate that information to their certain situation, and it doesn't all relate. sometimes a person has to attack the situation in a different manner than what they've seen of the top 50 players in the nation. Those recruiting processes are just very much different. And just to have somebody to be able to reach out to is the best thing that we can do to give back to high school parents.
And that's so well said by all of you. And I hear exactly what you're saying, because there's a lot of noise and misinformation that tends to run the narrative, when the reality is there's common ground for all of you who are parents of Division I athletes, but everybody's journey is a little different. And to be able to separate the wheat from the chaff, if you will, through an organization and association like this has got to be nothing but good for you as parents and the parents that you'll help as they come along, particularly as they get started at the high school level. Any other comments or thoughts on that particular question? I think you guys covered all the bases with it.
But I just wanted to add, in respect to what Mr. Harmon was saying, is about walking in the dark. A lot of times you don't even know what questions to ask because you don't know what you don't know.
Yeah.
So I think that this type of organization, we're trying to fill that gap and meet that need.
Yeah, excellent, excellent.
And Mr.
Okay,
Kellogg,
go ahead.
I want to add one more thing. I apologize.
Please.
I want to add one more thing.
No, please go ahead.
You know, we're talking about the recruitment process right now, but then, you know, I want to say that, you know, my wife and our passion is the mental health piece as well. You know, when you're a ninth grade kid, #1 player in the country, and you have all these expectations and pressures on you and social media coming after you, you have to be able to like be mentally strong and, you know, be able to, you know, as a family, we gotta talk to our kids in regards to how to handle that. And I think the CBPA can offer resources and other parents' experiences in dealing with that, because, you know, the mental health piece, you know, we're huge on that, you know, with how the social media trolls attack, you know, these athletes because they have a bad game or if they're not what they're supposed to do. You know, how are the kids? No one talks about how the kids feel. So, yeah, you know, so I think that's huge.
No, that's great. No, I appreciate it. Thanks for interjecting that, because that's critically important. I'm going to move on to our next group of parents. And my next question is for Tonja Morrison and Molly Manley and Larry Suggs and Michelle and Derrick Sharpe. Why was it important to form CBPA for families from all walks and levels of college basketball as you guys look at it?
I can probably take that first real quick. I just jotted down a couple things. How you doing, Clark? I just said there was a need for a community so that families know that they're not alone in the experience, and the community to share and gather information and experiences. And most families do not go through this process more than once. And like I said, I've known Rod for 20 years. We used to play 3-on-3 basketball together when the boys were 3 years old. So they'd be running around, shagging balls. So me and him, we've been on a long journey, and we've all talked on the phone and stuff like that. And it's just, like I said, to be able to get the information and pass it along and all the wisdom to other families so that they will be able to go through the experience. And we have 2 daughters as well, and their recruitment will be totally different than what Jalen's is. And we've already sat them down and started talking about them and what their journey would look like. So that's what.
Awesome.
Also, it's important to have representation at every level. It is very different, Division I, Division II, Division III, high level, mid-level, it's all very different. And having representation or the ability to talk with someone about the differences is key for me.
Yeah. Go ahead, Tonja. You look like you had a comment you wanted to make.
I want Deon to go.
Well, Deon can go then.
Okay, go Deon. Ladies last.
Well, at the end of the day, there are just a lot of families, again, with kids that are at different levels. And the families are just coming from different viewpoints, different backgrounds. And so to be able to just reach out to an organization and say, hey, I need some help. I may not be that person that can help them, but now I have an organization that I can reach out to get them that help, that knowledge, that education that they need. That's about as plain as we can say it.
I agree. Okay, I know the Sharpes are down low, in as well, but I think as far as taking this walk of college basketball is important with the CBPA is because, like, kind of piggyback with Deon say, it's the knowledge that we lack as parents, and I know other couples have said it as well, but just knowing what you're getting into, knowing how to do the recruit, how to get your kid to go to the next level, and what is expected, how for them to get there is very important. You know what I'm saying? Because like you say, every kid gonna be on a different level. Every expectation gonna be different for a kid. And I was with I think that was the Johnson family, if I'm not wrong. As far as that mental status, because if my kid don't make it to the next level, then we still got to bring something in to let you know it's okay. You may have to go a different route to get you there. It just all depends on what you want and how hard you got to work for it. But to sum everything up, you do better when you know better. So when you get on board, you know, we get the knowledge of it. We're gonna be able to speak about it. We're gonna be able to talk about it. Everybody gonna be like, that's right. Then, you know, sum it up. You do better when you know better.
Now with this Howard.
Hi, good afternoon, everybody. I think I'm going to piggyback off of everybody. I think everybody have really touched on some good points on today. One of my reasons why I'm happy to be a part of this organization at this point, and working with families, helping them with the recruiting process. You know, a lot of kids, they are missed on this journey. One of my favorite athletes that I bring up is Ja Morant. He was missed, you know, and helping these kids get in front of the right people. I think the Sharpe family was very fortunate with, you know, with last minute decisions and having Mr. West in our circle, Mr. David West, that we were able to use as a mentor. And, you know, having those resources, like everyone has said on today, is very important. And it's very, I want to say, it eliminates unnecessary decisions that many of us have made, even with choosing the right AAU team, you know, or going through that process. You know, the kids want to jump ship and go from one AAU team to another AAU team. And I tell most of my parents, was like, when you do that, that coach that you was looking for may have been on that team, and now they don't see this child. That it's important just to be still and wait. Stop running from AAU team because you can't get along with the coach, because you can't get along with the parents, because you can't get enough playing time. So it's very important to educate the parents even on that level. I could go on and on about this. I love the idea, but I'm gonna leave the floor open for someone else.
No, thank you. Thank you very much, Michelle. Well said by everybody. I've got one more question as we round for home for our last group of the steering committee: Melissa Smitherman, Second, Nikki, and Brian Burnett. And this question is as follows: how have your conversation with your student athletes gone to this point, as well as their coaches, as you've talked about the creation of the College Basketball Parents Association with your student athletes, your sons and daughters, and then also as you've had a chance to talk to coaches? What's been the response?
I'm going to take that. With Seth, Seth was quite curious when I mentioned I've never made decisions for him. I've made decisions with him. And this was one of those times where I needed him to make a decision with me. whether or not this was something that he felt was a good idea to be a part of. So he was very curious. And once I reflected on our journey and our experience, he thought it would have been a great resource for us to have had something like this. You know, you go through this recruiting process and you get a lot of pressure from coaches to make a decision really fast. And if you don't, there's somebody else that, you know, may take that spot from you. And, you know, as they say, you don't know what you don't know until you know. And we had a unique situation with Seth, with academically, what he wanted to do for his journey. And you get a lot of pressure from outside. So once we talked about this, he was extremely encouraging and thought this was going to be a great opportunity to help other young student athletes make a better and informed decision. And the not just he, but the whole coaching staff at Ohio State has been extremely encouraging. They wanted to understand a little bit more about it, and we had conversations. And from there, it's been nothing but positive reinforcement to be a part of this.
Any others have had a chance to talk to your student athletes or coaches, and any other perspectives on how they've felt about hearing of the CBPA?
The whole coaching staff at Gonzaga was extremely supportive. We're very excited we were part of it. Jalen was pretty focused on game week, so it was pretty brief with him, but the Coach Few was great. He, you know, said anything we needed help with, feel free to reach out, let him know, and he'd be more than happy to help. So it was very, very comforting to know that they were supportive of what we were doing as well.
Yeah, sure. Great. Any other thoughts or comments on that question? I'm glad to hear that, and I'm not surprised. I would think most coaches, because this is something that will enhance the experience for the student athlete. And anytime you're doing that, all the stakeholders should be in favor of it. And so let me thank you all again. I know there were a couple of our steering committee parents that I mentioned that were unable to join us, but certainly appreciate all of you all being here and what you're doing. And going forward, this is going to be exciting to see how this resource and this association continues to develop for the good of the young people playing the game, but also for the families that are part of the journey, and ultimately for the good of the game in total. And so I'm excited to be a parent of former athletes, but also to be an advocate for this type of association and this type of work. So with that, again, thank you all. Appreciate you guys stepping up and doing what you're doing. And I'm going to turn it back over to my man, Bruce.
Hey, thanks, Clark, a lot. Thank you for the moderated conversation. We always get to know your heart, but a lot of times that is as a player and your experience there. But to hear you and the parents talk about your respective passions for leadership and helping others, and parents helping parents, we just really appreciate that. With that said, we're going to transition into our media Q&A and really thank everybody for using the Q&A to submit questions and multiple questions. And so with that, we are going to, again, bring you in into the room, if you will, out of the audience, allow you to visibly and with audio, ask your question directly to the parents. Again, we ask that you identify yourself by name and media outlet before your question. And if it's directed to anybody, please share that as well. So I'm going to go kind of in order as they've been submitted with Mr. Haggerty up first. You had several questions. I think one of them has been touched upon already, and a lot of talk about the current process of college basketball right now. But your second question got to some change coming in the NCAA. So if you could share that with the families, that would be great.
Ladies and gentlemen, thank you for allowing me to be on this. I had two questions. The first one was, what one or two things do you feel the NCAA needs to do now to improve the lives of the student athletes, both academically and athletically?
to any of the CBPA Steering Committee? Anybody want to address that question, as well as the staff?
You know,
I would just ask him to repeat the question. I just want to understand the question.
Yes. Can everybody hear me? Can nod? Okay. What one or two things does the NCAA need to do now to improve the lives of the student athlete, both academically and athletically in college?
Well, for my part, I'm not really, most of our athletes are parts of top-notch programs that do pretty well with taking care of the athletes. But I think that across the board, the NCAA might want to do a better job of educating student athletes and parents, and bringing parents into the fold as partners, because sometimes they can be viewed as someone who is maybe a deleterious influence. But I think they should reach out and do a better job of treating parents as partners, as opposed to someone who should be, I think the term is helicopter parent or whatever. So I think that building partnerships with parents, I think the NCAA could do a better job of that.
And I kind of piggyback on that as far as with the NCAA, like you say, academically wise, I think the college that we're at, speaking on my behalf with my child, Q Morrison, I think that's been phenomenal, because she graduated in 3 years. So she actually in grad school with her 4th year. So as far as that go, I think that's good. But as far as one thing I think they can improve on is, like, they are young adults. And I know they have a lot of rules that they feel like that the parents should know a lot that's going on, that everything is private within the student itself. But when they're young adult and can be a little immature, and they haven't fully grown to the adult that they need to be, I think we should be able to be more involved in that area when it comes to our children, so we can still stay on that same road with them and make sure they do continue to be successful in life and education wise, and life.
And Mr. Haggerty, I want to say thank you for your question. This is Courtney Scott. I would like to say one of the things that at the CBPA, what we're doing is we're going to be taking surveys. So we're going to, in the upcoming months, we're going to have surveys. So we don't want to speculate on, what we possibly think could be done better, but we're going to be taking surveys. Once we receive a large sample size from the parents, we'll take surveys and ask them, hey, what are some of the things you like? What are some of the things that could possibly foster, an even better relationship than you already have with the NCAA. If you have a good one, what can we do to get there to have a great one? So to answer your question, we're going to be doing surveys so we can better answer that question. What can we do to make our game, the relationship stronger? Because just like in basketball, you can be shooting 85 to 90% from the field, but we always want to get to 100%. So we're going to be taking surveys from these parents to find out, what are some of your interests? And then we'll talk to the, if the NCAA wants to, once we talk to the NCAA, we'll say, hey, what can we do to make some things better on your end as well? So it's an amalgamation of opinions and thoughts to make this engine move smoothly.
I'll just jump in too real quick to add in to that question, Mr. Haggerty. I think, one of the things to think about too is just a recognition of the fact that the NCAA, college sports in general right now has so much going on as it relates to managing COVID and all that's happening right now. But at the same time, there are a lot of changes that are coming on the horizon for college sports generally. And so, I think you've heard, many of the parents throughout the conversation today talk about education. And I think that's one of the things that we want to make sure that exists, is the education for parents on some of these changes that are coming into college sports. When you think about the impact that COVID has, on health of individuals and athletes, as well as long-term economics. When you think about changes coming with name, image, and likeness coming into college sports next year, thinking about the impact and change of potential transfer rule changes. I mean, there are a lot of significant changes coming to college sports that, some of the parents have talked about, being a resource to help share with the NCAA what they want to hear and what they want to learn and need to hear about so that they can best advise their student athletes. That's one of the things that I think that we'll want to be able to see from an education perspective as we go forward.
Thanks, everybody. Mr. Haggerty, thank you as well for your questions. I know you had another one, and if we have time, we'll try to circle back to you. I'm going to head towards Don Stenson. Also had multiple questions, and I think the question on what can people expect in being part of this organization is a good one that we maybe haven't touched on as much so far.
Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for your time. The question I had is there an organization that's out there, maybe in another collegiate sport? And if not, is there a possibility of expanding to those other sports?
So I'm happy to kind of take a quick stab at that, Mr. Stenson. Thank you for your question. I think there are other parent organizations that we've kind of heard of as we've just kind of launched this last week. And there's really no focus on expansion at this point. It's really focused on, really providing the education, the community that we've talked about, that you've heard from parents, throughout the conversation today. And then where there's opportunities for partnerships and, sharing of resources, sharing of information, then definitely the CBPA, kind of stands ready to be able to do that throughout, organizations and various stakeholder groups, both within college basketball and beyond.
Awesome. Thank you, Mr. Stenson. Mr. Moody, did you want to share?
I didn't. It just jumped on me. I didn't have a response. Yeah.
Okay, no problem. Our next question from Dana O'Neill with The Athletic.
Yeah. I just had a couple of questions. One, I guess you mentioned, your need to get involved. I wonder if the first question is why you feel like maybe you guys have been cut out of the process. I mean, are there other groups that have had too much influence that need to be you guys need to take a front seat in front of them? And is that part of the impetus here? And the second question is, can you get a seat, I guess, at the table where the decisions are being made? And how important is that? Like with the NABC, the NCAA and organizations like that, can you actually get a seat with those while the decisions are being made as opposed to just after the fact?
Thank you for your question. I think the first thing we would like to do is just galvanize the community. The first thing we want to do is really just galvanize the community get all of the parents together first. And I think before we can, really talk about getting a seat at the table, we just have to understand what the parents want. They may want a seat at the table. They may not want a seat at the table. And then they may just want to have their voices heard because nothing like the CBPA, as far as the parents of basketball players, has never been done before. So the first thing is just really getting a community of parents, the Division 1 through 3, NAIA as well, just getting them together first. Then come the education piece. We all learning together, what would they like to see at the forefront. And then I think we can be able to move forward about a seat at the table or a seat not at the table. But it's really just hearing their voices in unison and finding out what they would like to hear and what they want.
Courtney, if I could jump on that one as well, because I do feel like the voice is the thing. And more than anything, people just can get used to hearing parents, acknowledging parents. And as we start to understand just what's needed from an education standpoint, I think that's been brought out in some of the discussion that just says our voices will resonate somewhere where they're needed. And if we can be, kind of framed as a support or framed as an asset to whoever's making decisions about our kids. Because typically, you know, if you have a kid on a campus, if something goes wrong, we're the ones that they're going to call, or we're the ones who, you know, typically your parents help make things better. And I feel like, you know, a lot of the decisions that are being made, a lot of things that are happening in basketball, and whether it's a seat at the table or not, it's really about saying, hey, parents have some input, that if you'll just take a listen, you can take that into your decision-making processes, and you'll have the understanding of a parent who's probably operating more from the best interest of their kids' well-being, and probably aren't as confrontational as people might think. And so I feel like if we're able to just put a voice out there and a place for folks that need the information that parents have, they can go get it in as much as an informative way as possible.
And I'll just add to the one part of the question around like the NABC and other groups. So when we launched last week, we sent out a message just before launch. We reached out to many of the stakeholder groups to give them a heads up, to share information about who the CBPA is, kind of what the mission is, what our focus is, and how we look forward to building a relationship. So reaching out to the NCAA, NABC, WBCA, you know, men's and women's basketball at the NCAA as well. And the responses that we got back were incredibly supportive. So over time, we will be looking to work with and support and be a resource for those groups, as well as leaning on those groups for information, education, like we've been talking about. So incredible responses of positivity, you know, in those conversations just last week. And we look forward to continuing to build those relationships as we go forward.
All right, thanks so much. Next up, we will have Kurt Benson come in with his question. All right, going next, Jasmyn Fritz had a great question for our UNC and Duke parents. Are Jasmyn or?
Yes, I'm here.
Wonderful.
I'm Jasmyn Fritz. I work for Buzz Sports Radio in Raleigh. I cover UNC and Duke men's basketball. So this question is specifically for those parents. Although I'm not sure the Sharpe's on, I know the UNC game has just started. I'm curious what, if any, I know obviously this is surrounding by, you know, the involvement, but what involvement did you guys have when it came to conversations about the season starting up, and was there any conversation or knowledge that you guys were made or you were privy to prior to those decisions being made?
So this is Carole Roach. My son is Jeremy Roach at Duke. We weren't part of the decision, but we were told early on what was going to happen. So I think that they try to keep us in the loop. They try to keep us involved as much as they can, to the point of being left out. I mean, I think once you get into college, you're so used to kind of directing everything for your kid. From high school, you can talk to the coach, you can talk to the principal, you know, you can talk to the teachers. And now when you get to college, you're kind of letting go of those reins and, you know, putting your trust into those coaches. So, you know, Duke does a great job of communicating with us. Again, we're not, you know, we don't have that seat at the table, you know, to say, but they are keeping us abreast ahead of time. Exactly. And, you know, I don't think that we would be able to influence. I mean, maybe, you know, down the road, if the parents did have more of a voice, we could influence some of those. But, you know, with the COVID situation, it's kind of hard to, you know, impose what you want, because you do have to look at the health of the student athlete. But they're doing a great job of keeping us informed, even though we're not on campus or we're not going to the games. But they do a lot of Zoom calls with us just to keep us informed and let us know what's going on.
Thank you, Carole. We second that.
Can I ask a quick follow-up? Do you have time for that?
Sure, go ahead.
Okay, just quickly, is there anything that you would have liked to see differently in terms of, I mean, not having a decision or a say necessarily, but was there anything that specifically that you wish you could have been able to say, hey, you know what, a lot of parents actually think this would be better suited for us and my child at Duke?
You know, as far as like our Duke situation goes, I think, you know, they put the health and well-being of our kids first and foremost. So every decision that they made was based off of that. So, you know, I think I have no complaints. You know, obviously I wish my son would have got there in June like every other kid and had that extra 3 months, but you know, they stayed in contact with us. They had the boys in summer school. They had them on a workout plan and doing Zoom calls. So not to brag about Duke, the best college program in the country, but they did a great job in taking care of our boys. And, you know, just right now, you know, our boys have been, you know, COVID free, knock on woods, you know, since they've been there. And, you know, they're making arrangements as right now, as far as like, you know, over winter break, you know, as far as like if they got to stay there or what they're going to do. So they're on top of it. We're happy with the situation. So, yeah.
Awesome. Thank you very much. I'm going to go to the next question from Krysten Peek.
Hi guys, it's good to see everyone. I know I've seen a lot of you guys in the gym over the years at high school events and AAU events. So I love that this organization has come to fruition. And I just had a quick question because I know this is mainly focused on the recruiting process and giving advice for, you know, everything that you guys have all been through for the recruitment process. And I 100% agree when the Moody said, basketball is better when parents are involved. And that being said, you know, in the instance where the next step comes, getting ready for the NBA and the draft and the agencies and all those meetings, is there any sort of plan to have this expand into that and to be a mentorship for that process as well?
Maybe I'll take a first stab at answering that. Thank you so much, Krysten, for the question. So one of the things that we've noticed and we've received from different parents who are interested in the CBPA and the mission of the CBPA is the fact that there are going to be different needs of different parents, oftentimes based on you know, kind of where their student athlete is at in the process and different things that are happening. So when you think about breaking down different kind of groups, we've talked about and had conversations at the leadership level around, you know, how do we, you know, help make sure that, you know, athletes who are going to be transitioning from college into, you know, grad school or into a professional career and what that might look like. There could be a subset for that. There could be a subset, you know, where there's a panel for, you know, potentially parents of, you know, college basketball players at the D3 level or at HBCUs. And so I think when we look at how can we meet the needs, as Courtney Scott mentioned earlier, you know, doing surveys and understanding the needs, where there exists a need for parents of players who are potentially transitioning into the pros to bring the unique education, mentorship, and other things that you've talked about. Absolutely, that could be another kind of area of education, because there are unique challenges that come with that transition, just like there are some unique challenges that come with other, you know, parents of college basketball players that find themselves in different situations in college sports. So I think the answer to your question is yes, but it's more broad than just, you know, the transition to the pros. It's really meeting the needs of the parents from an education and development perspective.
All right. Mr. Haggerty, you had a second question. We know you've got to go in a few minutes. So we'll have Mr. Haggerty come up, and then Dana O'Neill will have a second question as well.
Again, I want to thank everybody for letting me in on this. I want to direct this at Clark first and anybody else that want to jump in. With the emergence of the AAU becoming more important than the high school basketball coach when it comes to recruiting, do you think that's what's causing parents not to get the information because it's not filtering from the high school, the guidance counselor, and it's coming more from the AAU coach who really isn't in the building?
I certainly think that's a factor, Leo. I mean, the landscape has changed dramatically, and not all of it is for the worse. I mean, I know AAU basketball gets painted with a pretty significant bad brush, but there's some great positives to AAU basketball in terms of exposure and camaraderie and experience. Just like any other organization or group, they're good and bad elements, but I do think that is part of it. Clearly, kids are valuing the AAU experience for their basketball futures more highly than perhaps the high school experience. While they enjoy it, AAU does have a little bit more value in the eyes of kids and parents. And as a result, that circuit does take a higher priority, not just with the parents and the kids, but the college coaches place significant priority on that as well. So I do think it created a bit of a vacuum in terms of how things used to be handled, where going back to my ancient days of being recruited as a top player in the country, late 70s, my parents were involved. My high school coach was involved because AAU hadn't gotten to where it is now. So I just think that's part of the evolution and change, and even more reason that you have an organization coming to fruition for the purpose of education and empowerment, and allowing the advocating voices and the experiences of parents to be part of that ecosystem in a constructive way. And I think that's why I'm excited to see not only the CBPA come into existence, but to see how it grows and evolves, born of what the parents talk about and determine are some things they'd like to try to be engaged with one another and with the game. But clearly AAU has impacted the involvement of families and the high school coach for sure.
I'd like to add to that. I think Larry and I and Jalen have been very lucky in that we have a great partnership with our high school program, our AAU program, our high school counselors. Everyone was involved in every step of the way. College coaches would come visit the high school. Our high school staff would come to AAU tournaments. So we really were lucky in that. And I would like to say that we would like that to happen for other people. It was very beneficial for us.
Hey, this is good. I'll keep going. So, for one,
and he's the AAU coach.
I'm the AAU coach. So everybody knows me across the country. I talk to everybody. So we always have good talks, and everybody gets great intel. And what we did was at school, we said, hey, we told the coach early on when he was in 7th grade that he'd probably be a Division I athlete, and we want you to be a part of all the kids' recruitment that are there at Minnehaha Academy. So we divvy it all up between all our coaches. We probably got about 4 or 5, and we all share in that experience. And like I said, I give them a schedule. They say what tournaments they want to come to, and when they come through right away, we have a good time. We explain to everybody where everybody's at, where all the coaches are, where the media is. And once they come back to high school season starts, then I turn it all back over to Coach Jay. And then Coach Jay, he gets on the phone, he'll say, hey, so-and-so called. They're going to come on at, 7 o'clock in the morning and come see the kids. So we just had a great relationship. And like Manley just said, I hope that everybody else can have that same type of family feeling. And that's what we always look for. And high schools, I believe, and AU coaches can coexist and kind of make sure that everything happens for the student athlete the way it's intended to be.
Outstanding. Mr. Dixon, did you have something to add?
Yes, please.
I just wanted to add that Larry's a phenomenal AAU coach. Unfortunately, we had to face him a couple times on the subject. But I just wanted to reiterate that not everybody can have that type of great partnership, but they can coexist as long as there's a mutual respect. But also, that's why we need to bring the high school parents in, because all of our kids have played AAU, or most of them. So we can share those experiences too and talk to them. Like one of the other parents talked about not running from the AAU situation if you don't like something right away. I just think that, having sharing those type of insights with other parents about, maybe sticking it out or when it might be time to leave, from our own personal experience is a good thing to bring to the table.
Thank you. Ms. Morrison?
Well, he pretty much just touched on it. That's what I was going to say. And that's the purpose of CBPA, because having the knowledge of your own and knowing, getting the information that you need to know, because a lot of AAU coaches are not for that some particular kids. Because I've know parents that are AAU coach, wouldn't tell them that college coaches was looking at them. They withheld the information. So I think it's very knowledgeable of a parent to know what's going on with your child, whether they on AAU team or whether they on high school. So I understand the question that you're saying, even though I know AAU is a bigger circuit, but with the CBPA, if you get this knowledge into these parents, we won't have to depend on an AAU coach. You'll have this within yourself, and you'll know what is best interest for your own child. So just want to add that a little bit.
Thank you so much. Anybody else? We've got 2 other questions in the queue.
Yeah, I got something I want to just kind of mention in response to that question. I kind of feel like I've had different experiences. I have a kid that was a high-level basketball player, and I have a current high school kid that is a high-level football recruit. And the recruiting process is vastly different for the 2 sports. Within football, I feel like there is no way I can really advocate for my son. Everything and all the control is left with the school, which I'm not saying that's a bad thing, but it's an unnerving thing when you feel like you have no way to help your kid either get recruited or be in the situation of just recruiting and speaking with the coaches until way after the fact. With AAU and basketball, because AAU existed, I was able to create a good partnership with the high school coach during the recruiting process. I've had basketball coaches and college coaches come and say that they do most of their recruiting at the big events for AAU basketball. They only come to the high schools after they already know that you're good enough to play college ball. And really all you can do is lose your scholarship when they get to talking to the high school coach. So that created the perfect environment for me to be able to talk to the high school coach and just partner. And so that felt like a situation where we had an opportunity as a parent to continue to parent and advocate. As opposed to football, I felt like the parenting part was a little in the dark. We just didn't have the information. So I had to kind of go out and seek it. And it was only from one place. Ironically, the place that I got it from was a relationship that I had with a basketball coach that got me in contact with one of the college football coaches that explained the recruiting process for me. So we were able to put a plan around that. And so the idea that the CBPA is around, I think that is going to help parents have those avenues so that we don't have to work so hard to find and search for that information.
Thank you. Thank you. We'll go to our last 2 questions. Dana with the Athletic again.
Yeah, I think this is along the same lines, and I just want to kind of clarify. If you guys felt as a group maybe that parents' voices had been muted, and I'm not blaming AAU coaches or any party in particular, but just in general, do you guys feel like there was a need for your voices to come together and be heard more, to have more involvement, in the entire recruiting process and even the on-campus once they get into campus and they're student athletes?
This is Carole Roach, and I think the CBPA gives you information. It gives you information so that you know what questions to ask. Like, we've said so many times, you don't know what you don't know. So as you're going through this process, if you just know, okay, these are 3 questions I should ask every coach or every AAU coach or, every college coach, then that gives you more insight and it helps you to feel more comfortable with the whole process. So again, I just think that information is power. It's not necessarily that, we have to change the process at this point, but the sharing of the information allows you to know the process, just as Deon was saying. Now he knows what questions to ask and how to navigate. And I think that we just didn't have the information. It wasn't necessarily that we always wanted to be there, do this, you know, or change it this way, but just have a good understanding. And a lot of times you just don't have that understanding because the coaches are, you know, they're moving at their pace. They're not moving at the parents' pace, and they don't always come back to the parents' pace to make them understand unless you have those, you know, gating questions or those polling questions that you can ask them. So the CBPA will be that bridge and give you that information and that knowledge.
Well said. And if I can jump on that, because Carole did such a great job, maybe my answer will blend in with hers, because that was really powerful. Because I do think that I wouldn't say that we've been muted as much as, you know, when you have a voice and you feel like you have something that would add value to the discussion, you just want to be heard. And one thing that I would kind of point to is I have a good relationship with the school. And one of the things that has happened with me is going through the recruiting process. I intentionally was not trying to be the friends of the coaches. I wanted to get information. I wanted to kick the tires, and I wanted to get an honest sense of what situation my kid would be walking into. But of course, you know, once you've signed the coach's job, you trust the coach and you say, okay, now you take it from here. So I try not to get involved with any basketball discussions, but I do feel like there's a platform to speak with other people on campus that have a bigger impact on the basketball program and just on the school in general. And that's kind of where my relationships have kind of blossomed to where I'm able to interact with the AD or other people on campus and inform them. And one thing that I noticed is some of the questions that I asked, I couldn't imagine that if there was a parent who was intimidated walking into that environment and trying to get the information that I was getting. So to Carole's point, if there was a list of questions that a coach would just automatically offer so that that parent wouldn't have to be concerned, especially if the parent is not a standout, the kid is not a high level athlete where the coach is probably a little less tolerant of tough questions, I think that creates a scenario where you can empower parents on all levels to be able to communicate and get the type of information they need to make sound decisions. So I think more than anything, it goes back to that voice being heard.
And I'd add, Dana,
Go ahead.
I'm sorry, Rona.
That's okay. And initially for me, it's less, I think, of, you know, not what hadn't been heard or you know, what influence we may have initially with CBPA, with this, you know, our main objective being about community education and advocacy. I think I'm excited about the fact that we get together as parents at this time first in the organizing phases to communicate with each other about what our experiences are, what are our needs, you know, what you know, what's happening well and what's not. I think starting there is just a good place for me personally. And then I think from there, you know, we'd look at, you know, additional needs that we may need.
Yes, I was just going to add to the three of you, Carole, Rona, and Kareem, in regards to, you know, one of the objectives of the CBPA, you know, we're talking about, you know, speaking and having relationships with people, but I think a huge piece of the CBPA is going to be having this group and organization for folks to reach out to who don't have an agenda. I think the word agenda is a big obstacle that a lot of us have probably gone through. Like, who do we go to get an answer without having that question mark in the back of your head when you get the answer, right? I mean, who else do you want to go to other than a parent with experience who isn't going to give you what you want to hear? They're going to tell you what they experienced. I think that's a huge piece, you know, to this organization as well.
Can't find my clapping emoji, so.
Yeah.
And if I can add, like the Moody's was saying, because I have friends that just don't know nothing about sports. Their kids are in sports. Their kids are good with sports, but they have no knowledge. Oh, what you think you think I should do this? How do you think this should go? They just have no knowledge. So the voice of being heard to educate them on that is a powerful thing, because they have no idea. Because I don't know anything about football. If I had a child that played football, you come at me, I'd be lost with a deer in headlights. But the purpose of that is to make sure. I know a lot of parents that missed out on situation because they didn't have the knowledge of anything that was going on with their child with basketball.
And I think the lack of knowledge can sometimes be quite expensive And that's what we learned the hard way. We didn't know what we didn't know about medical coverage, and because we didn't know to ask. So for us, and I've gotten a call in August from a young man who was being recruited at the same school that Seth previously went to. And in the same type of situation, he wanted to be educated. And, you know, I didn't hold anything back. I think it's an amazing institution, but you have to educate people on certain things that are offered, certain things that are not offered, things that are covered, not covered, because I felt like it was my due diligence to help someone else because I didn't know. And, you know, $dollars later, you know, now I'm going to help somebody else. So maybe they can figure out how to navigate around that so that doesn't happen to them.
To add to Melissa's point, we want to pay it forward. We've been able to have relationships with people. We've been able to ask questions of other parents. We've gathered a lot of relationships along this journey. And we ask questions. I ask a lot of questions. I probably drive people crazy, but that's just, I ask a lot of questions. He's my son. I can do that. I birthed him. But to be able to pay that forward is very, very important because people have been there for us to ask questions of, and it's been very helpful.
Just to think about the whole process in and of itself, I thought about recruiting. The way I felt about the recruiting process was kind of the way I felt about being a parent when we found out that the kids were getting ready to be born. I was excited, I was happy, but I was scared as hell because I did not know what to expect. And so at the end of the day, recruiting, sending your kid to college, we know we're sending young adults to college for them to become independent. But I think Clark said it earlier one day that you never stop being a parent. And those are things that we have to still try to figure out how to navigate and grasp for information so that we can pass that down to our young adults, not just student athletes, but to our young adults to help them make decisions and advocate for themselves. That's the role that I feel like I'm in now, is to help my son advocate for himself in all aspects of college life and basketball. And those questions are going to come to me. And my role now is just to try to go and help him find the information. And that just gives me comfort as a parent that I can continue to parent my child with informative information from folks that don't have a stake in the end result. And so the CBPA has just been great for the community aspect and going forward with the educational part.
Wow, just a tremendous amount of insight. We probably could have stopped right there, but we do have one more question. And this question is a really good one to end the press conference on. So if we could allow Don Stenson in. Don, please answer this or ask this great question.
Hopefully this ties it all together. Again, this is Don Stenson, DNA Sports Talk. Using the collegiate analogy, this association is in its freshman stage. In 4 years, when it becomes a senior, what are one or two things that are going to mark real success or real progress for the organization?
I would say a very educated community of parents.
Yeah. For my part, I would look at it as a success being not having 700 and something kids in the transfer portal, where you have parents making better decisions at the outset, so that because they have more information, instead of getting to a place and going, oh, I wish I would have known this, or I wish I would have known that. Now we need to leave this place. So I think that would be a sign of the organization helping and going in another direction, is that you have less people trying to reverse decisions they made in the first place.
I would add that we've grown. We have a connected membership. People are engaged. They know what we're doing. And then, you know, parents, the voice, you know, we're not this omnious group where, you know, people are afraid of us. You've kind of put a face on who parents are, and the narrative kind of complicates some of the stereotypes I think that people have. And so we're working in unison with all the other stakeholders, and parents have a seat from that perspective.
Yeah, and I agree with what Molly said as well. I'd love to see it be a strong resource, place of information for parents overall.
I would just say that in 4 years, like the CBPA will be the first thing that someone thought about or a parent thought about as they're starting to go into that recruiting process, that it would be so well known that, you know, oh, my son's entering high school or he's going to a senior year. Here's where I can go for information and I can join this group. So it'll be well known across the country.
For me, it would be that the colleges and the basketball programs start to seek out their own information from the CBPA so that they can make better decisions or more enlightened decisions that encompass the student athlete even more than what they're trying to do now.
Awesome. Anyone else to close us out on this last question?
I would just say, you know, if you wanted to use that school analogy, one of the things that we know is that obviously all the parents and the leaders that you see here, their sons and daughters are going to graduate and move on to the next level of sports or of their lives. And so as a co-executive director, when I think about the longevity of this organization, I think about, you know, continuing to develop parent leadership, parent engagement in the CBPA so that it's a long-lasting organization. And really, as we talked about the various stakeholder groups in college basketball, that the CBPA becomes that resource for those organizations as decisions are being made, that the CBPA and the collective of college basketball parents are sought after for their perspectives, for their insight, for their concerns. And so ultimately, as decisions are made about the growth and direction of college basketball, the parents are a part of that conversation.
And we agree with everybody. And one of the things that, you know, our passion is obviously mental health. And one of the things we want to see is that when it comes to these athletes, that the stigma of, you know, having a mental health issue or circumstances, you know, that stigma is removed and people are more comfortable with being who they are and being able to speak out on those issues. So we're looking forward to being a part of that and seeing the CBPA, you know, make that come to fruition.
Awesome. Well, with that, we'll close the press conference. Thank you to the CBPA Steering Committee. Thank you to Clark Kellogg for joining us for this conversation. Thank you to all the media for the great questions and taking the time to join us today. Please stay in touch with us with any interview requests you may have down the road at media@thecbpa.org. You have my personal email as well from the press releases and media advisories, but we just thank you for joining us today for our first press conference. Please remain safe and have a great holiday season. Thank you.